Bhagavate Sri Ramana. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana. Om Bhagavate Sri Ramana. Om Namo 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 Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. We will begin today's Sri Ramana Puranam Satsang with a verse from Tirumandiram as an invocatory verse. ஐந்து கரத்தனை யானை முகத்தனை இந்தி இளம்பிறை போலும் எயிற்றனை நந்தி மகந்தனை ஞான குழுந்தினை புந்தியில் வைத்தடி போற்றுகின்றேனே. This is a verse in praise of Lord Ganesha, praying for his grace, wisdom and knowledge to grant us the fortitude and the wisdom to understand the task at hand, which is to understand Ramana Puranam as composed by Bhagavan and Sri Muruganar. We will pick it up from where we started last time, and then we will continue into new verses today. Last time we started at line number 213. யானொன்றும் இன்றி இதயத்து இதயமாய் தான் ஒன்று மோன உபசாந்த தனி முதலோன் அவ்வவர் தம் தன்மையால் அவ்வவர் பால் சேர்ந்து உலகின் எவ்வவர் தம்மாட்டும் இயல்பாய் இருந்தொழுவோன் யானொன்று எழாது இயல்பாய் ஏயும்போது என் மயமாய் தானொன்று நின்றி தயங்கிடினும் ஏ என யான் தன் பழமை காண தலை தூக்கின் அக்கணமே என் புதுமை நோக்கியவன் எழுகைத் தனை கரப்பான் யான்பின் தலை சாய்ந்து இறந்தாலே அவ்விரைத்தாள் தான் முன்போல் என்னுள் தழைத்து ஒளிரும் ஆதலால் யான் எழுவும் முன்னும் அவ்வியான் ஒழிந்த பின்னுமலால் தான் ஒளிரா அந்த தலைவன் பெருமை உணர்ந்து யான் என்பது அற்ற இறை உணர்வால் அல்லான் மற்று யான் என்னும் போதத்தால் யார்தாம் இயம்பவலார் செப்பத் தரமில் சிவரமணன் மெய்ப்பரிசு வெல்வேன் அம்மிக்கோன் வியனருளால் விண்ணுளாய் மண்ணுளாய் வேதாகமத்து உள்ளாய் பண்ணுளாய் பாட்டுளாய் பார்ப்பார்கட்கு எங்குமுளாய் வண்ணமோர் ஐந்துடையாய் வாழ்த்து வாராய் பரவி எண்ணுவார் தங்கள் இதயத்துள் போய்ப்படிந்தாய். We ended up making a remark that right around this time, Bhagavan began the composition of Ramana Puranam. We know the story that Muruganar unable to decide how to name this poem, left the papers at Bhagavan's feet. Bhagavan seemed to have continued composing where Muruganar left off. Under Bhagavan's scrutiny and remarks, Muruganar happened to delete the precise point at which Muruganar ended and Bhagavan began. But it's a reasonable conclusion that Bhagavan began his work from somewhere around these lines, because we see a distinct change in the style of this poem and the direction of the poem. So up until this line, 232, this has been an exemplary poem on Bhagavan's virtues as a supreme being and the benevolence and the compassion that he shows towards devotees. From this point onwards, we would see an extraordinary, exposition of Bhagavan's teachings. Particularly, we should think of this as an exposition of Ulladu Naarpadu, a composition of 42 verses by Bhagavan. And we would see that extensively be presented here with elaborate, teachings of the nature of the self, the nature of the individual self, and how one should attain, the supreme glory through self-inquiry and surrender. So those are the themes that would unfold from lines 233 onwards. First, lines 233 to 234. வெள் என என்னுள்ளே வெளிப்படாது எண்ணெயை எள்ளென உன் தன்னை எனக்கு கறந்தாய். வெள்ளென என்னுள்ளே வெளிப்படாது எண்ணெயை எள்ளென உன் தன்னை எனக்கு கறந்தாய். So, karantal or karandai means he who has gone hiding, or he who does not reveal himself openly. வெள்ளென என்னுள்ளே வெளிப்படாது. Here it said that I can't clearly see the glory of the Supreme Self openly and directly. And why is that? Because in the previous few lines, this poem describes that because of the ego, the apparent separation of the individual self exists, and therefore the Supreme Self seems to be in hiding. Expanding that further, here it is said that the self can't be directly viewed openly, although the self constantly shines in the heart. And how is that? வெளிப்படாது எண்ணெயை எள்ளென உந்தன்னை எனக்கு கறந்தாய். So el means sesame seeds. Like how the sesame seed, when one looks at it, they can't see the oil that is within the sesame seed. Likewise, when we see the heart for the first time, when we try looking for the self, it is not easily visible or easily available. However, we know through extraction and through constantly grinding the sesame seed, we can extract the oil that has always existed. Likewise, when we go through the process of purification of our mind, such as self-inquiry, we discover the presence of the Supreme Self that has always existed, shining subtly, silently, and forever being present. So, வெள்ளென என்னுள்ளே வெளிப்படாது எண்ணெயை எள்ளென உந்தன்னை எனக்கு கறந்தாய். Like how the oil is hidden in the depths of sesame seeds, you do not reveal yourself openly, yet you shine within my heart always, subtly and silently. Those are the two lines that then leads into further lines that explains the nature of this hiding, or the Maheshwara Tattva, meaning that which goes in hiding. We see a number of references for the sesame seed and oil. Particularly, we see that in Tiruvachakam, in chapter 5, verse number 46. கொள்ளுங்கில் எனை அன்பரில் கூய்பணி கள்ளும் வண்டும் அரா மலர் கொன்றையான் நள்ளும் கீழ் உளும் மேல் உளும் யா உளும் எள்ளும் எண்ணெயும் போல் நின்ற எந்தையே. கொள்ளுங்கில் எனை அன்பரில் கூய்பணி கள்ளும் வண்டும் அராமலர் கொன்றையான். So here Aramalar Kondrayan is he who wears kondrai flowers in his long matted locks. So this is referring to Lord Shiva. And in a beautiful poetic verse, um, this is said that the kondrai flowers that are woven in Lord Shiva's head constantly attract those bees, and those bees extract honey from those flowers. So that is the way that the kondrai flowers are so fresh and so brimming with pregnant honey for anybody to go and take on. So when that Lord, so what is it about that Lord? He says, "Kullungil ene anbaril kuipani." So here Mickkavachagar says that like how he called upon other devotees to do his service, I wished he also called me into his service. Kollungil. I wished he called me enai anbaril kuipani, like how he called other devotees to do his service. Kallum vandum aramalar kondrayan, nallum கீழுளும் மேலுளும் யாவுளும். So here he says he's everywhere, he's below, he's above, as well as he's inside of me. And the Yavulum is he's inside of me. How is he existing inside of me? Yellum ennayum pol nindra endaye. Nindra endaye is oh my Lord, or oh my Father. Endai is my Father, or my supreme Lord. Yellum ennayum pol. It's the same analogy that is presented in Sri Ramana Puranam, which is like sesame seed and the oil. So here the reference is a bit more explicit in Ramana Puranam, where it is said that the oil that is always hidden within the sesame seed. Here the reference is loosely made for us to understand. So like how the oil exists within the sesame seed is how the Lord exists within us always. And the way that we extract the oil from sesame seed is through grinding. Here the equivalent is persistent self-inquiry to identify the supreme being that is always being present inside our heart. This is further explained in verse number 215 of Sri Ramana Sannidhi Murai of Muruganar. I'll read this without going into a lot of details. எள்ளுளே நெய்போல் என்னுள்ளே இருந்த உன்னையோர் இல்பொருளாக எள்ளியே இகழ்ந்து இழுக்குமே நோக்காது என்னையும் ஓர் பொருள் என ஆண்டு வள்ளமாய் இந்த கள்ளேனன் கையில் வளம்பட வந்த வேங்கடவா உள்ளுள்ளே உணர்வாய் ஒழிவர வரினும் உள்ள நான் வெல்குவேன் அன்றே. So here the same reference is used, எள்ளுள்ளே நெய்போல். Here it says, like the oil within the sesame seeds, you always shined within me. However, I couldn't identify you and I thought you were non-existent. உன்னையோர் இல் பொருளாக எள்ளியே இகழ்ந்த இழுக்குமே நோக்காது. So without realizing your presence and without recognizing your presence, I laughed around and I faulted by externally engaging myself without being aware of your presence within me. And overlooking that fault, you actually have come over to rule me over. என்னையும் ஒரு பொருளென ஆண்டு, thinking that I'm worthy of something, you have come over to rule me over. வள்ளமாய் இந்த கள்ளேனன் கையில் வளம்பட வந்த வெங்கடவா. So you have come over here as if I am worthy of something, and you have ruled me over, and you have made me worthy of something by your presence within me, and you by revealing yourself to me. And he's saying, O Venkadava, உள்ளுள்ளே உணர்வாய் ஒழிவர வரினும் உள்ள நான் வெல்குவேன் அன்றே. Though you constantly shine within, as the I awareness, which is what is called as Ullulle Unarvai, Ulivara Varinam. You are constantly present. You are never absent. Ullanan Velgiven Andre. Although you're present, can I recognize you? Can I understand you without your grace and without your compassion? So that is how Muruganar prays to Bhagavan. The point of this is the sesame seed and oil reference is again made here, which is what is made in lines number 233 and 234. வெள்ளென என்னுள்ளே வெளிப்படாது எண்ணெயை எள்ளென உந்தன்னை எனக்கு கறந்தாய். Moving on. So you can now see a flow that is slightly different in tone and texture than the prior lines. I'll read this, but this goes on for nearly 20 lines. So I had to put an artificial break here for lack of space in the presentation. So we will start with lines 235 to 240. அறியாமை என்னும் ஆவரணம் தன்னுள் வெறியாடு மேதினியை விக்கேப சக்தி உளத்துண்மை தோன்றாது ஒருங்கு இருண்டதாலே வெளித்தன்மை எவ்வனமோ மெய்யும் அதுவென்ன புலனாக காட்டலும் என் புந்தி மயக்குற்று நலனாகும் என்று அதனை நாடலும் அந்நாட்டம். Will continue. அவாவாய் பரிணமித்து என் ஆருயிர்க்கு எஞ்ஞான்றும் தவா அப்பிறப்பீனும் வித்தாய் சலஞ்சை பிறவியாம் பொல்லா பெருமரத்தைத் தோற்ற மரபியான் மற்று அம்மரத்து ஒரு புள்ளாகி இருவினையால் சிந்தை அழிந்து எம்மருங்கும் நோக்கித் திருமறலால் காய்கனியை தின்று தின்று வீணே மரித்து மரித்து இன்ப துன்பம் மாறாது துய்த்து வெறுத்து மனத்தொன்றும் விளங்கா நிலைக்கண் அவத்தமே நாயேன் அழிந்துபடா வாற்றால் உவத்தல் உவர்த்தல் அரும் உண்மை அருளாலே அருணை நகர் தன்னிலோர் அந்தணனாய்த் தோன்றி கருணை விழியால் கமலபதம் காட்டி அமைதி பெற சிந்தை அறிவானந்த தேனே அமைவர எப்போதும் பில்கு ஆரியுர் கோமானே. So these lines starting from 235 to 254 form one long explanation of the present state of the individual jivas. We will take this section by section and go deeper. Going into these lines, அறியாமை என்னும் ஆவரணம் தன்னுள் வெறியாடு மேதினியை விக்கேப சக்தி உளத்து உண்மை தோன்றாது ஒருங்கு இருண்டதாலே வெளித்தன்மை எவ்வனமோ மெய்யும் அதுவென்ன புலனாக காட்டலும் என் புந்தி மயக்குற்று நலனாகும் என்ற அதனை நாடலும் அந்நாட்டம். So let's go deep. அறியாமை என்னும் ஆவரணம் தன்னுள். Avaranam means hiding or completely hidden. So the explanation for this is given in the prior two lines, where he's not really hiding or concealing himself. He's present constantly, like how the oil is present within the sesame seed. And that is what is called hiding or veiling. அறியாமை என்னும் ஆவரணம் தன்னுள். So here அறியாமை is ignorance. What is the ignorance? It's going to be explained. அறியாமை என்னும் ஆவரணம். Ignorance is the veil that obscures. What does it obscure? தன்னுள் வெறியாடு மேதினியை விக்கேப சக்தி உளத்து உண்மை தோன்றாது ஒருங்கு இருண்டதாலே. So we need to change the lines here to make cogent meaning. So for the purposes of seeing meaning, it's the first line, third line, then the second line. So read it again. அறியாமை என்னும் ஆவரணம் தன்னுள் உளத்து உண்மை தோன்றாது ஒருங்கு இருண்டதாலே வெறியாடு மேதினியை விக்கேப சக்தி. That is how we should interpret this. அறியாமை என்னும் ஆவரணம் தன்னுள். Because of the ignorance, that is the veil that obscures the self. உளத்து உண்மை தோன்றாது. The truth that is always present in the heart is hidden because of the ignorance. And because of that ignorance, the complete supreme self has gone dark, or the light has become dim. And what is that primary reason? It's because of the first of the three gunas called tamas, or laziness or inertia. So because of that, the ignorance gets formed. Because of that ignorance, the self is not recognized. So that is the first cause. அறியாமை என்னும் ஆவரணம் தன்னுள் உளத்து உண்மை தோன்றாது ஒருங்கு இருண்டதாலே. Because of the ignorance that veils the radiant self within, and that ignorance is caused because of tamas or tamasic nature, which is also called as laziness or inertia. The mind cannot clearly recognize the presence of the Supreme Self inside. And because of the lack of that recognition, the darkness or the lack of wisdom is present. So lack of wisdom is present because of the tamasic nature of the mind. Tamasic nature is laziness and being inert. And being inert leads one's perspective to be lost on the presence of the self. When the presence of the self is not recognized, darkness sets in. So what is the result of the darkness? That's when the second line comes in. Veriyadu mediniyai vikkeva sakti. So the Shakti that exists, that first gave the tamasic nature to the mind, also mutates itself and engaging with the worlds that exist externally very noisily. Veriyadu Medini. Medini means world. Veriyadu Medini is very noisy world or very noisy external world. Viksheba Sakti. Vikshebam is a Sanskrit word that means mutation or change. Shakti. That Shakti that gave the initial tamasic mind, which was inert and lazy, transforms itself to engage with the external world. And that is called the Rajasic attitude. That is one that is characterized with passion and activity. So the external engagement is leading to the next point, which is in line number 4. வெளித்தன்மை எவ்வனமோ மெய்யும் அதுவென்ன புலனாக காட்டலும். So what happened? First, the ignorance came about. The ignorance was caused by the veiling Shakti that was tamasic in nature. And because of that veiling, the presence of the self is not recognized. Because the presence is not recognized, it became dark or less visible or dim. That dimness led to the engagement with the external noisy worlds. And now the tamasic attitude transforms itself to Rajasic attitude, which is characterized by passion and activity. We cannot forget there exists a single presence of the self. So all these things are the same exact thing. What is the self is the same as the veiling power. And that veiling power transforms itself to tamasic, which then transforms to Rajasic. They can't be thought as multiple different things. There exists a single presence of the self. So all of them are the same exact thing. And going next, வெளித்தன்மை எவ்வனமோ மெய்யும் அதுவென்ன புலனாக காட்டலும். Through our 5 senses, புலனாக காட்டலும். Through our 5 senses, when we begin engaging through that powerful Shakti, வெளித்தன்மை எவ்வனமோ மெய்யும் அதுவென்ன, we begin to believe that whatever the external world is, that is the inner world. That is the truth. வெளித்தன்மை எவ்வனமோ. Like how the external worlds, we believe the internal world is same. That is what the internal world is. வெளித்தன்மை எவ்வனமோ மெய்யும் அதுவென்ன. We think that is the truth. And we believe that is all that exists. And why is that? Because our five senses constantly engage because of the Rajasic attitude, everything that appears around us begins to look like reality. And as a result of that, என் புந்தி மயக்குற்று நலனாகும் என்று அதனை நாடலும் அந்நாட்டம். என் புந்தி மயக்குற்று. So the intellect that was originally clever in recognizing the presence of the self also gets dimmed because of this constant engagement resulting from the tamasic and the rajasic attitudes also becomes dim. And nalanagam endru adhanai nadalum. It starts to engage more and it starts to entangle itself more, perpetuating that illusion that whatever exists externally is the truth. Nalanagam endru nadalai. First time it engages because of the Rajasic attitude, and that through the five senses, the Shakti makes it believe that what exists externally is real and the intellect is dimmed. And because of that, we believe engaging externally deeper is the right attitude. So we continue to engage externally. So here Bhagavan begins to explain the nature of our entanglement. Why do we begin the entanglement? So that is the gist of it. அறியாமை என்னும் ஆவரணம் தன்னுள் வெறியாடு மேதினியை விக்ஷேப சக்தி உளத்துண்மை தோன்றாது ஒருங்கு இருண்டதாலே வெளித்தன்மை எவ்வனமோ மெய்யும் அதுவென்ன புலனாகக் காட்டலும் என் புந்தி மயக்குற்று நலனாகும் என்று அதனை நாடலும் அந்நாட்டம். Ignorance is the veil that obscures the radiant self within, cloaked in the darkness born of tamas, which is characterized by laziness and inertia. The mind, unaware of the truth, mistakes the noisy external world for reality and rushes to engage with it under the sway of Rajasic attitude, which is characterized by passion and activity. Through the five senses, this powerful Shakti, acting through the ignorance and restless activity, projects the world as real and entices the mind into deeper entanglement, perpetuating illusion. So, annatam, this is where it continues to the next few lines. We'll go to that. அவாவாய் பரிணமித்து என் ஆருயிர்க்கு எஞ்ஞான்றும் தவா அப்பிறப்பீனும் வித்தாய் சலஞ்சை பிறவியாம் பொல்லா பெருமரத்தை தோற்ற மரபியான் மற்று அம்மரத்து ஒரு புள்ளாகி இருவினையால் சிந்தை அழிந்து எம்மருங்கும் நோக்கி திருமறலால் காய்கனியை தின்று தின்று வீணே மரித்து மரித்து இன்ப துன்பம் மாறாது துய்த்து. So here Bhagavan goes into deeper explanation of the entanglement that he spoke about previously, and the result of which is two beautiful allusions. The first one is a Tirukkural, Avavai Parinamittu en Aruyirku Egnandrum Tavavai Appirapinum Vittai. So that is Tirukkural. We will come and see how that Tirukkural is used here. Then the second aspect of these lines between 241 and 247 is a summary of what is present in Mundaka Upanishad, in which there are two birds being described living in the self-same tree, one that looks outside, another that looks inside. So here, the same analogy is being used to explain the presence of this ego and how this individual jiva was born. So continuing from prior, annatam. So that constant entanglement with the external world leads to what? Avavai parinamittu en ஆருயிர்க்கு எஞ்ஞான்றும் தவா அப்பிறப்பீனும் வித்தாய் salamjai. So salamjai is creating, quivering or shaking, meaning it constantly creates the movement. What is that movement? Avavai parinamittu. So the initial engagement that began with tamasic and rajasic attitudes and believing this world is real because of the engagement through the five senses, we continue to engage, and that engage transforms itself to multiple passions. So avavai parinamittu. So the seeking that began, the engagement that began with the world transforms itself to passions. So once the passions are kindled, avavai parinamittu, they manifest as passions. என் ஆர் உயிர்க்கு எஞ்ஞான்றும் தவா அப்பிறப்பீனும் வித்தாய். So the moment those passions have begun, my attention has been completely drawn away from the presence of the Supreme Self within. And what happens? என் ஆருயிர்க்கு எஞ்ஞான்றும் தவா அப்பிறப்பீனும் வித்தாய். So in that turning externally, tava appirapinam. So, enyandrum tava appirapinam. Forever, without giving up that external engagement, the birth of the individual jiva or the apparent illusion of the independence of jiva has been sown like a seed. So, how does that happen? Because of the Rajasic and Tamasic attitude, the external engagement first began. That engagement further fortified itself through the engagement of senses, making it believe the world is real. And when the world is thought to be real, the intellect that would otherwise be aware of the inner presence of the self also was dimmed. Because of the dimming and because of the constant engagement of these five senses, we begin to engage with the world. That engagement transforms itself to passions. And when passions are kindled, the attention is drawn away from the self. And because of that external turning or because of the engagement, the illusion of the independence of jiva was sown like a seed buried deep within. So here it says, Engyandrum tava appirapinam. So long as that external engagement exists, for that time, for time immemorial, meaning forever, such engagement externally leads to the birth of the illusion of independence of jiva. Meaning the independent jiva exists defined by these passions and the Rajasic and Tamasic attitudes. Our passions may be different, but the fact those passions engage the attention away from the self is constant within everyone or every individual jiva. And that exists forever. So long as that external engagement happens, that movement becomes the seed for creating the illusion of independent jiva. Tava appirapinum vittai salamchai, piraviyam polla perumarathai thotra. So what happens when the seed is sown? It blossoms into a tree. And what is that tree? Piraviyam polla perumarathai. It sprouted into a vast tree of birth and death. So this polla perumaram, meaning it is not a wanted one, it's an unwanted large tree. And it's polla, meaning it is full of trouble. Why is it full of trouble? Because the tree constantly creates birth and death. And so what is the source of this? Because of the initial engagement of the world and believing the world is real and the intellect is dimmed, and that results into further engagement. That engagement transforms it to passion, and the passion is the beginning of the seed of an independence of the self, independence of the jiva, and that separateness grows into a big tree of birth and death as a cycle. And that is full of suffering. That is defined by Polla Perumaram. It is a large tree that is, causing a lot of suffering. Maravi yan matru ammarattu urupullagi. So, so this tree is created, the birth and death cycle created. Then further ignorance sets in. Maravi yan matru. forgetting now completely this individual's ego was originally and has always been the self because of this, in the Maya, Maravi Yan Matru, forgetting that we are the self, forgetting we are the truth, we furthermore get blinded by ignorance and we become a bird within that tree of birth and death cycle. Ammarathu, within that tree, oru pullagi. Pull means a bird. So, because of further forgetfulness, we ourselves, which was a source, remember, of the engagement, which was a source of the seed, that seed then blossomed into a big tree, and further ignorance made us a bird within that tree. மறவியான் மற்று அம்மரத்து ஒரு புல்லாகி இருவினையால் சிந்தை அழிந்து எம்மருங்கும் நோக்கி. So that bird, what happens? That bird now further gets engaged. Iruvinai. Iruvinai is two types of actions. What are the two types of actions? The actions is both bitter and sweet, or like and dislike. The pairs of opposites begin to engage. Sindai alindu, the mind becomes completely entangled, which I like this, I do not like this is sweet, this is bitter. So the bird, which is the individual jiva, yam marungum noki, it looks everywhere else, completely driven by the likes and dislikes, the sweet and bitterness, and the mind is completely, consumed by this action reaction framework. இருவினையால் சிந்தை அழிந்து எம்மருங்கும் நோக்கி திருமறலால் காய் கனியை தின்று தின்று வீணே. Tirumaral is such a beautiful word. We encounter this word in the Aksharamanamale benediction verse composed by Muruganar. Tirumaral is complete blinding ignorance. So what happens? First, the forgetfulness sets in, we become a bird. Further ignorance happens. The bird actually then gets consumed by, the good and bad, ugly and, prettiness, sweet and bitter. So all sorts of pairs of opposites. The mind gets consumed. The bird looks around everywhere, constantly engaging. Tirumaralal. Then the deep ignorance sets in. Kai kaniyai tindru tindru veene marithu marithu. Kai kaniyai. So, here kai is unripened fruit. Kani is ripened fruit. So the fruits that come about within that big tree that's been described previously bears fruits. This bird goes and eats those fruits, meaning it constantly engages externally. It becomes happy when it gets something. It becomes sad when it doesn't get something. It becomes sad when it loses something. It becomes happy when it gains something. So that constant engagement is thirumaral, meaning complete blinding ignorance, meaning complete, unawareness of the presence of the self. That ripened and unripened fruits are constantly eaten. Again, the pairs of opposites are introduced. Irvinai, meaning two sides. Kai kani, the ripened and unripened. Tindru, meaning it eats and eats, meaning, so something repeated twice in Tamil, it means it is to ad infinitum. So here, by using the word tindru and tindru twice, meaning eating and eating, by consuming this again and again, Veene marithu marithu, wastefully, marithu marithu, we die and be born, dead and be born. So that cycle of birth and death continues. Marithu marithu, it's dead, it's born, it's dead, it's born. What is that? The bird keeps dying and be born. Why is that happening? Because it is sitting in this tree. The tree itself is the birth and death. Inba tunba maradu tuittu, the happiness and sadness, the pleasure and pain, constantly, without change, it's either pleasure or pain. Maradu tuittu, experiencing the pain and pleasure in the endless cycle of birth and death. Caught in the birth and death tree, The bird doesn't know what to do. It keeps engaging driven by these passions, and it likes something, dislikes something, angry, sad, all sorts of emotions set in, and it constantly enjoys this. It's a very stunning poetry that Bhagavan has composed here, and it actually describes the state of the individual jiva and basically our life in such a beautiful poetic line. So I'll read these lines again. Abavai parinamitthu en ஆருயிர்க்கு எஞ்ஞான்றும் தவா அப்பிறப்பீனும் வித்தாய் சலஞ்சை பிறவியாம் பொல்லா பெருமரத்தைத் தோற்ற மறவியான் மற்று அம்மரத்து ஒரு பொல்லாகி இருவினையால் சிந்தை அழிந்து எம்மருங்கும் நோக்கித் திருமறலால் காய்கனியைத் தின்று தின்று வீணே மரித்து மரித்து இன்ப துன்பம் மாறாது துய்த்து. Through such seeking, my passions were kindled, drawing my attention away from the self. In the turning, the illusion of independent jiva was sown like a seed buried deep within. Over time, it sprouted into the vast tree of birth and death, upon which my jiva, like a restless bird on the tree, perches life after life. Enshrouded in ignorance, this bird, my individual jiva, busies itself with both righteous and unrighteous deeds. With nothing wiser to pursue, my jiva began to consume the fruits of these actions, sweet and bitter alike, just as the bird eats the produce of ripened and unripened fruits of the very same tree it sits in, caught in the endless cycle of pleasure and pain. I mentioned that there is a Tirukkural being used, which is in these lines 241 to 242. அவாவாய் பரிணமித்து என் ஆருயிர்க்கு எஞ்ஞான்றும் தவா அப்பிறப்பீனும் வித்தாய் சலஞ்சை. So the Tirukkural is verse number 361. அவா என்ப எல்லா உயிர்க்கும் எஞ்ஞான்றும் தவா அப்பிறப்பீனும் வித்து. It says, desire is the eternal seed from which the cycle of birth and death endlessly springs forth for all beings at all times. Ava என்ப, ava means desire or passions, எல்லா உயிர்க்கும், for all lives or all beings, எஞ்ஞான்றும், at all times, தவா அப்பிறப்பீனும் வித்து, without fail or without end, endlessly, that is the source or that is the seed from which all birth and death begins. So that Tirukkural is used here very beautifully to blend into this verse. Abavai parinamitthu en ஆருயிர்க்கு எஞ்ஞான்றும் தவா அப்பிறப்பீனும் வித்தாய். So Bhagavan obviously explains why did that seed come in the first place in the lines from 235 to 240. In these lines from 241 to 247, obviously he explains the peculiarities or the existence of this jiva, or the independent of jiva, which is obviously illusory because it is not true, because all that exists is a self. Guided by the initial tamasic and rajasic attitude, it begins to take its own life, so to say. So moving on to the next section, the final section of this part, lines 248 to 254. வெறுத்து மனத்துன்றும் விளங்கா நிலைக்கண் அவத்தமே நாயேன் அழிந்து படா வாற்றால் உவத்தல் உவர்த்தல் அரும் உண்மை அருளாலே அருணை நகர் தன்னிலோர் அந்தணனாய் தோன்றிக் கருணை விழியால் தன் கமலபதம் காட்டி அமைதி பெற சிந்தை அறிவானந்த தேனை அமைவர எப்போதும் பில்கு ஆருயிர் கோமானே. It's beautiful. Now we begin to understand the grace of why Bhagavan has come as a jnani in Arunachala in the form that he has. So we should remember that Bhagavan is writing on behalf of Muruganar. So it is very beautiful how Bhagavan explains his own presence in his own words and the reason for his existence as if Muruganar is writing his poetry. வெறுத்து மனத்துன்றும் விளங்கா நிலைக்கண் அவத்தமே நாயேன் அழிந்து படா வாற்றால் உவத்தல் உவர்த்தல் அரும் உண்மை அருளாலே அருணை நகர் தன்னிலோர் அந்தணனாய் தோன்றி கருணை விழியால் தன் கமலபதம் காட்டி அமைதி பெற சிந்தை அறிவானந்த தேனை அமைவர எப்போதும் பில்கு ஆருயிர் கோமானே. So this explains why Bhagavan came, how Bhagavan is radiating his compassion and grace to us, and how do we benefit through that compassion. That is this section. So obviously, a lot of people keep engaging like a bird in the vast tree of birth and death. Some are exceptions, and those exceptions are first created by realizing the misery that we all undergo. So that is the beginning of engaging with the Supreme Self. Virithu manathundrum vilanga nilaikan. Loathing this low life, manathundrum vilanga, unable to get any help through mind, or helpless to escape this misery, we struggle, vilanga nilaikan. So without, we hate the present situation. We don't know the path forward. We don't know how to escape this misery. So we struggle like a dog. Vilanga nilaikan avattame nayen. I struggled like a dog. Arindu padavatral. But though we hate this misery, though we struggle like dogs, chained to the suffering, not knowing how to escape and not knowing the direction of travel, but because of the kind compassion of Bhagavan, Arindu pada vatral, he did not let me perish in the moment. So he didn't give up on me. Although I have done all of these things that have been explained previously, I'm struggling now. I surrendered, and Bhagavan has taken his kindness onto us. How is that? Uvattal, uvartal, arum, unmai, arulale. Uvattal is desires. Uvartal means aversions. Obviously, they sound very close, but they are two distinct words and opposites. Uvattal is desires and passions. Uvartal is aversions or hatreds or dislikes. Arum, both are gone. How is that gone? Unmai arulale, because of his true grace. And how did that desire and aversions are driven out of me? Arunai nagar tannilor andananai thondre. So Arunai Nagar, here he means the town of Arunachala or the mountain of Arunachala. Nagar is usually city or a place. Arunai Nagar is in the place of Aruna, meaning the Arunachala, Tannilor. At Arunachala, or Andananai. Andanan usually means a Brahmin. Here it means a Jnani or one who has realized the Supreme Self. So that is why, that is how Tirukkural defines Andanan, which is he who has realized the Supreme, being or Supreme Self. So at Arunachala, you appeared as a Jnani full of grace, Andananai Tondri, Karunai Viriyal Tan Kamalapadam Kati. With your merciful eyes, Karuna is compassion and merciful. Viriyal means eyes. Through your merciful eyes, Tan Kamalapadam Kati, you revealed your lotus feet, your holy feet, Kati. So how did he reveal his holy feet? Through the inner awareness that shines within each of us as I am I or Spuranam. The mere presence at the feet of Bhagavan opens that for us all the time. And that is what he emitted his grace through his eyes. So the presence of Bhagavan as a Jnani at Arunachala, by just a mere glance, unveiled his holy feet as the supreme awareness I am I in anyone who has surrendered unto him in front of him. And what happened then? Amaidi pera sindai. So the awareness I am I calms the mind down by removing desires and aversions. Amaidi pera sindai. So it calms the mind. After that, Arivananda Thenai. the honey of the supreme wisdom, the Satchitanandam, the supreme wisdom, அமைவர எப்போதும் பில்கு ஆருயிர் கோமானே. So here Muruganar reveals an important aspect of this, that honey-like wisdom is bestowed on us slowly over a period of time, bestowing the permanent and enduring peace always. அமைவர எப்போதும், to bestow that permanent peace always. Pilgu aruyir komane. The pilgu is very important, which means revealing slowly. Although we abide in this Puranam, that slowly but steadily pulls us towards the supreme abode of Bhagavan, where the permanent bliss exists. It peels our attachments over a period of time, and that is the power of self-inquiry. அமைவர எப்போதும் பில்கு ஆர் உயிர் கோமானே. He ends it here. Komal means a ruler, or the ruler of my sweet life, or the bird now has transformed itself into the supreme self. The tree is gone, the birth and death is completely ended. வெறுத்து மனத்துன்றும் விளங்கா நிலைக்கண் அவத்தமே நாயேன் அழிந்து படா வாற்றால் உவத்தல் உவர்த்தல் அரும் உண்மை அருளாலே அருணை நகர் தன்னிலோர் அந்தணனாய் தோன்றிக் கருணை விழியால் கமலபதம் காட்டி அமைதி பெறச் சிந்தை அறிவானந்த தேனை அமைவர எப்போதும் பில்கு ஆருயிர் கோமானே. Loathing this lowly existence, yet helpless to escape its misery, I struggle like a restless dog, chained to suffering, lost without direction. But in your boundless compassion, you did not leave me to perish in that torment. You appeared at Arunachala as a jnani, a beacon of grace to free me from the grip of desires and aversions. With a single glance from your merciful eyes, you radiated peace, revealing your holy feet as the light of inner awareness. Gently, like honey dripping from a blossom, you unveil the supreme wisdom, bestowing enduring peace upon my restless mind. You are the true ruler of my sweet life. We will review these three sections, line numbers 235 to 254 again. It's one long section divided into three parts. Part 1 is explaining why the engagement began. Part 2, how the independence of Jiva was established. 3, the solution to the independence, which is surrender at the feet of Bhagavan and have his merciful glance upon you. That shows the path, but the path, once revealed, is slow but a steady process that gets the mind and pulls it and makes it abide permanently in the feet of the Lord. And let it work that way. So here the explicit revelation is pilvidal, revealing slowly. Although the immediate inner awareness is accessible, one needs to persist with it until such time the permanently established self reveals itself in its full glory, and that is what Bhagavan calls as Sagaja Samadhi in his vocabulary. Going back, அறியாமை என்னும் அவ் ஆவரணம் தன்னுள் வெறியாடு மேதினியை விக்ஷேப சக்தி உளத்து உண்மை தோன்றாது ஒருங்கு இருண்டதாலே வெளித்தன்மை எவ்வனமும் மெய்யும் அதுவென்ன புலனாக காட்டலும் என் புந்தி மயக்குற்று நலனாகும் என்று அதனை நாடலும் அந்நாட்டம் அவாவாய் பரிணமித்து என் ஆருயிர்க்கு எஞ்ஞான்றும் தவா அப்பிறப்பீனும் வித்தாய் சலஞ்சை பிறவியாம் பொல்லா திருமரத்தை தோற்ற மரபியான் மற்று அம்மரத்து ஒரு பொருளாகி இருவினையால் சிந்தை அழிந்து எம்மருங்கும் நோக்கித் திருமறலால் காய் கனியை தின்று தின்று வீணே மரித்து மரித்து இன்ப துன்பம் மாறாது துய்த்து வெறுத்து மனத்துன்றும் விளங்கா நிலைக்கண் அவத்தமே நாயேன் அழிந்து படா வாற்றால் உவத்தல் உவர்த்தல் அரும் உண்மை அருளாலே அருணை நகர் தன்னிலோர் அந்தணனாய் தோன்றிக் கருணை விழியால் தன் கமலபதம் காட்டி அமைதி பெற சிந்தை அறிவானந்த தேனை அமைவர எப்போதும் பில்கு ஆருயிர் கோமானே. The meaning is, ignorance is a veil that obscures the radiant self within, cloaked in the darkness born of tamas. The mind, unaware of the truth, mistakes the noisy external world for reality and rushes to engage with it under the sway of rajas. Through the five senses, this powerful Shakti, acting through ignorance and restless activity, projects the world as real and entices the mind into deeper entanglement, perpetuating illusion. Through such seeking, my passions were kindled, drawing my attention away from the self. In the turning, the illusion of independent Jiva was sown like a seed buried within. Over time, it sprouted into the vast tree of birth and death, upon which my Jiva, like a restless bird on the tree, perches life after life. Enshrouded in ignorance, this bird, my individual Jiva, busies itself with both righteous and unrighteous deeds. With nothing wiser to pursue, my Jiva began to consume the fruits of these actions, sweet and bitter alike, just as the bird eats the produce, ripened and unripened fruits of the very same tree it sits in, caught in the endless cycle of pleasure and pain. Loathing this lowly existence, yet helpless to escape its misery, I struggle like a restless dog, chained to suffering, lost without direction. But in your boundless compassion, you did not leave me to perish in that torment. You appeared at Arunachala as a jnani, a beacon of grace to free me from the grip of desires and aversions. With a single glance from your merciful eyes, you radiated peace, revealing your holy feet as the light of inner awareness. Gently, like honey dripping from a blossom, you unveil the supreme wisdom, bestowing an enduring peace upon my restless mind. You are the true ruler of my sweet life. We would see the next section to be similarly long. It's also another 20 to 30 lines. I don't think we would be able to begin and do justice to the next section. So therefore, we will end this at line number 254. Happy to answer if you have any questions.
I have a question that since we are saying that these lines probably Bhagavan wrote, do you think Bhagavan would have referred to himself as Arunayanaga Tannil or Antananai Thondri? So I mean, he would not have referred himself like that, right? So that is where I get a doubt.
Look, we don't know for sure what lines were written by Bhagavan and Muruganar. It's only a speculation at best. But in general, Muruganar does not offer, teachings of his own. He usually either, explains Bhagavan's teachings or he writes in praise of Bhagavan. Though, as you can see, the course of the explanations beginning line number 233 onwards up until 254, these are fairly deep, teachings. And we could see Bhagavan has used some of these explanations in other portions, such as talks and, other areas. The question you had about, can Bhagavan refer himself as, Arunayanagar Tannil or Andaranai? Bhagavan referred himself as Arunachala Ramanan in another verse, also attributed to somebody else, but we know for a fact that Bhagavan himself wrote, which is Ahattamare Malarmidure Arunachala Ramanan Nahettanura Veitanura Segitanana Virai, which was usually attributed to Swami Viswanathan. But it's Bhagavan who declared the presence of Arunachala Ramana in the heart lotus of every devotee. So here it is to be noted, it's not Bhagavan's writing it. It is Bhagavan is writing on behalf of Muruganar. So,
yeah.
And it is only our illusion that Bhagavan and Muruganar are two different entities, whereas Muruganar never had the doubt and Bhagavan did not have doubt. So in many places, Muruganar says, Bhagavan himself sat in my heart and he himself wrote the entire Sri Ramana Sannidhi Murai and all of the verses, where Bhagavan is praised in countless different ways by Muruganar. But we should not distinguish that Muruganar himself wrote that. It is Bhagavan who wrote that. But it also gets us to the next section of Ramana Puranam, where Bhagavan himself says, who is real Ramana? if you think it's the body with certain size and whatever, that is not true. It is a supreme Arunachala that stands for everybody to see every day. So that is what is going to reveal later on
Okay.
in meaning. So it is, so therefore it is not that far off to believe that Bhagavan wrote this.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Sorry to ask this question this late. In the invocatory verse from Tirumandiram, when you say Indi Ilanpurai Porum I have seen other explanations where here the forehead is compared to the crescent moon.
Yeah.
In some explanations I have seen his tusk, because those are bent like a crescent moon, they have compared that also. So I was not sure whether which explanation is appropriate.
I think both are appropriate.
Okay.
It's I've seen that explanation where his tusk is compared to the crescent moon or his forehead. Some places also refer to his tummy, which is also bent as like a crescent moon.
Oh, okay.
But the beauty of Tamil is you can interpret in multiple ways, and it also reveals its meaning to anybody in a way different. I'm sure just as the meaning that's been written in all this Ramana Puranam, somebody could equally write meaning in a slightly different way also because of the interpretation they have had.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for explaining.
There are no other questions. We will meet again. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.